Alright, what's going on everyone? Today I'm going to show you how to upgrade the 2021 Azorius controlled challenger deck on a budget. We will not exceed $30 USD with our upgrades, and if that currency isn't relevant to you, we're basically trying not to spend more than the deck's retail price with our upgrades. That's the idea. And before we get started, let me first apologize for the lateness of this video. I'll have more about that in the next video. And also, I just got done recording the Strixhaven Commander decks, and for some reason, like halfway through it, I started losing my voice. I don't know what happened, so I'm going to try to not be too loud in this video. Apologies. I don't know, I started losing my voice. Anyway, Azorius control. The big problem is most control decks run Yorion as the companion. Now this card itself is perfectly within our budget. We could buy Yorion, but the problem is Yorion requires us to play an additional 20 cards. We have to play with an 80 card deck, which I'm not saying it's not possible, but spending all the money on 20 cards kind of makes it hard to upgrade the rest of the deck, right? The other issue is Shark Typhoon. Most decks play like 2 to 4 copies. Every once in a while, there's a blue-white control deck that doesn't play Shark Typhoon at all in the main board. They play them all on the sideboard, but generally like 2 to 4 copies is typical because it basically functions as a removal spell. You cycle it at instant speed. You get a surprise blocker, right? They're not expecting it. You get to kill something because you block a creature that's attacking, and then you get a flyer to win the game with. So it's a removal spell, basically. I know it's an enchantment that puts out tokens, but it's actually a removal spell. It's a cycle, instant speed, get a token to kill a creature, and then kill the opponent with the shark token. But it's also a top-end game finisher as well. But the problem is, unfortunately, they're like $10 to $15 each, so we can't really afford those either. We could probably put one in. I probably will put one in, but it's like, we can't get 4. We definitely can't get 4. So that's unfortunate, but we can still upgrade this deck fairly easily, and I will give you some resources to upgrade into a Yorion build. So to start, we want to take out 2 Thirst for Meaning for 2 Skyclave Apparition, and this upgrade is free because you have the apparitions in your sideboard. Just take the Thirst of Meaning out of the main board, move Skyclave Apparition into the main board. Most decks play these main board nowadays. They're useful against basically every deck just because they don't have to hit creatures. And while Thirst for Meaning is good, the deck is actually overloaded with card draw and is lacking in removal. You have lots of ways to draw cards with this deck, but nothing to really draw into because there's not enough removal in it. So this fixes that ratio problem. Next, we're going to take out the last Thirst for Meaning for a Mazemind Tome. Most control decks are playing 4 copies of the tome because while it is slower, it does allow you to draw so many cards. And again, it's slower, but control decks have all the time in the world, and the extra cards over the course of a game is all the control decks typically care about. So being able to draw 4 cards potentially and being able to keep all of them instead of having to discard is what Mazemind's Tome is all about. Next, we have an optional upgrade, but we could take out 2 Behold the Multiverse for 2 more Mazemind's Tome. The reason I'm calling this optional is I think Behold the Multiverse is good enough that this isn't 100% necessary. If you're digging for a specific card, like let's say you're looking for a board sweeper, you actually see just as many cards with the spell for less mana. So I think that's fine, but the tome is better at card advantage over the course of the game. Behold the Multiverse is better at digging for a specific card on the spot, whereas Tome is better at drawing more cards over the course of a game. And even better, if you have Yorion as your companion, you get to blink the Tome to reset the counter. So a Tome is better, I think, in general, but Behold the Multiverse is good enough that I don't think this is absolutely 100% necessary. I am going to count it as an official upgrade, but it's like, I wouldn't fault anyone if they didn't want to go out of their way to get the tomes. Next, we're taking out 2 Skyclave Clerics for 2 Dwari Disruption. I just think the counterspell is better in most scenarios. The Cleric is pretty good against mono red aggro, but that deck operates on so few lands that the Disruption is usually just as relevant. Plus, it can counter big game-ending threats if your opponent taps out for them, so I just like the Disruption a little bit better. I think it's more useful overall. Next, I think it's worth taking out 1 Glass Casket for the 1 Shark Typhoon. Obviously, this is very expensive. Not everyone is going to want to spend this amount of money on just 1 single card, but it is really good. It's really good in this deck. There are some decks that only play 2, so I think you're on point only playing 2. A lot of decks play 2 main board, 2 sideboard. We can't afford the sideboard ones, but we can at least get up to the 2 main board. Again, some decks, a lot of decks actually play 4. The most common ratio that I've seen is 3 main board, 1 sideboard, but some play 2 main, 2 side, some play 0 main, 4 side, and some just play the full 4 main board, 0 side. Playing at least 2 main board, it gets us in the realm of what you see with some competitive decks, so that makes sense to me. Next, we're going to take out 1 plains and 1 island for 2 crawling barons. This is another potential win condition for us as a control deck. We usually hold our mana up, right? We don't want to spend mana on our turn. We wait to our opponent's turn to play counter spells or removal, and this gives us a way to use our mana if we don't use it for counter spell, right? If we don't have a removal or counter spell to play and we have untapped lands at end of turn, we just dump it into the barons, and over the course of a game we just slowly create a game-ending threat. So it's perfect for this type of deck. Definitely recommend it. We also have some changes to make to the sideboard, which matters more with a control deck than other archetypes, so this is pretty important. We took out 2 Skyclave Apparitions, so we can fill 1 spot with Soul Guide Lantern. This will give us some interactions with the graveyard decks like Lurrus and self-mill decks, and it could be decent against rogues, because emptying your own graveyard to shrink your opponent's creatures can sometimes be relevant, and if you find you side it in and don't need it, it can always be cracked for a card, so it's not the end of the world. The other empty spot, we're going to switch to a Disdainful Stroke, which is amazing, but a little bit narrow. It's very good against like 90% of decks, but it's really bad against Lurrus decks because it literally can't target stuff in Lurrus decks. So better in the sideboard, so it's not a completely dead card, but very useful to bring in after the first game. We can also take out the 2 Confounding Conundrum for 2 Sigrid God Favored. The Conundrum was an important sideboard piece when Omnath was a top tier deck, but that's no longer relevant, so we don't really need these conundrums, not really useful in the current metagame, and Sigrid is amazing against aggro decks. Not only does she remove an attacking threat, but she has 2 power with first strike, so she can 2 for 1 a lot where you exile 1 attacker and then block a kill another one. Very good against mono red aggro, very good against mono white aggro, stuff like that. We can also take out the 3rd Confounding Conundrum for Omen of the Sun. This is also very useful against aggro decks. It could take out 2 small attackers and gain some life, so great against mono white and mono red aggro. Definitely recommended. Would be even better if we could blink it with Yorion, but we can't. And that's it for our upgrades, though you can improve the mana base with Fabled Passage and Hengegate Pathway. These are expensive, but will limit how often you get color screwed, so very useful, but again, the prices are high. You can also potentially add 1 copy each of Castlevanters and Castle Ardenvale. These are fine. Both of these are typically played in control decks. Vantras lets you dig, Ardenvale gives you a free chump blocker, so definitely worth considering. And many Azorius control decks actually play Grand Triome. Might seem weird, we don't need the red, red's unnecessary, it's just a blue-white tap land that can be cycled when you're flooded, but these are very, very expensive, so not counting it officially, but if you have any, you can add them, sure, that's fine. So that's it, guys. Check the description or the pinned comment. I'm going to leave some links and resources for the Yorion builds. I'm going to have a full video soon, but I'm having some major internet issues at the moment and literally can't like work on this deck. I was like 90% done with it. I wanted to like flesh out this Yorion stuff, but I just can't because my internet is we have problems. I'm going to make a full video about it. It'll probably be the next thing I upload. But I couldn't work on this deck as much as I wanted to, and also can't respond to comments. It's a whole mess. It's a whole mess. Sorry, apologies, guys. But in the meantime, hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one, which will be me angrily raging about my ISP. Great, thanks. Cool.